let things work the way that they work and see what needs to be changed after you really understand how the business is functioning. It's easy to just look at a business and say, oh, you should do this differently and this differently. Um, but it's really important to go in and understand what really is successful, put some numbers to it, put some data to it before you make the significant changes.
Welcome to Business Buying for Financial Independence. I'm Tim Delaney, and I help young professionals buy small businesses so they can escape the 9-to-5 and take control of their time, income, and future. If that sounds like you, hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Today's guest is Brian Hulet. Brian is a father, volunteer, and owner of Sports Exchange in Mesa, Arizona. He bought the business after a 20-year career climbing the corporate ladder in healthcare administration. Now an active entrepreneur, Brian focuses on building local community partnerships and making sports equipment accessible to everyone. Brian, welcome to Business Buying for Fi.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to dig into your story a little bit because you, like myself, decided to buy a retail store, which a lot of people run away from. So before we get into that actual store, why don't you give a little bit of background on your career before that and what made you even interested in going out and buying a store?
Sure. Yeah, my career, I call it interesting. I feel like it's unique, but as I've listened to other stories on your podcast and others, there's there's a lot of unique stories out there. But the quick version is I went to school for exercise science. My degree was in exercise science. My plan was to go into physical therapy. Right out of college, I started working as a financial advisor and started making some good money and got excited about it. And then the market crashed. And so I went back to healthcare field and quickly was promoted to manager and had a significant role at a behavioral health and medical clinic in Idaho. And then moved from there into other management positions, took a job with a home health and hospice. I then moved into medical billing and was um, doing pretty well, making good money, and then found out that they were doing layoffs and that there was a good chance that my name was on the list. And so that made me explore what I really wanted to do with my life. And to add a little bit of color to that, I had started a business about 10 years before and had done, I actually started two businesses. One of them failed and the other one did fairly well. But it was just completely time consuming. I was working a full-time job and running a business. And so I sold that one and then thought I'm just going to focus on the corporate work and make money that way. Anyway, so with the layoffs, had to reevaluate what I really wanted to do. And I decided I was tired of chasing the money in the corporate world and playing the political game that tends to happen in some businesses, not all, but I wanted to change. And I had a friend ask me what I really wanted to do, and I wanted to buy a business. So then I went down that path and excited for where it brought me. I'll let you ask some questions along
Yeah.
those lines, and
No,
we can explore that.
I appreciate the background there. And I'm excited to get into what made you want to buy a business. But before we do that, I want to touch on that successful business in the past. I mean, I, there's a lot of people out there that have full-time corporate jobs or other types of jobs that start side hustles, start side businesses.
Sure.
It sounds like that's kind of what you did. So you started something on the side of your
Yeah,
full-time job.
it's it was a big undertaking. So my wife and I, we got three girls, and our oldest was getting ready to go into uh, kindergarten, and we're looking around at the different schools that were available, and we didn't like any of the options. And so we decided we were going to start a private school, um, kind of a big side hustle.
If
Uh,
that's yeah, just a simple little thing on the side of your
yeah.
job.
So the way we looked at it is, okay, the best process for this is probably to start with the kindergarten, and then we'll just add a grade as our oldest moved up a grade, we'll add a grade to the school, and we'll just gradually increase it that way. So we got a smaller location that we could use, and then as we thought through it, we're like, okay, we got to make sure there's money coming in. So what can we do to supplement that? So we had the school, and then after hours would be a community center where we'd have just community classes like dance classes, karate, different fitness classes, things like that. And then we could use it on the weekends too. So that was our approach. And I was working full time while doing this, but I found somebody to uh, manage the school side of the business. And I found somebody to manage the community center side of the business. And we invested a decent amount of money into the effort. Um, and got it set up, got it running. Our first year, we had kindergarten and preschool. We had a total of one kindergartner. That'd be my daughter. And, I think we had 6 to 8, preschoolers, um, most of them paying customers. And what I found was the community center did much better. We had people come into classes. We had several different dance classes, tumbling classes, karate, Zumba, theater class, and we were able to fill those classes a lot more quickly. And within the first year, realized the school isn't going to do so well, but the community center might. So I say we had one that failed. The school failed. Just lost money on that one, but the community center started doing well enough that we were back in the black after about a year and a half, and making a little bit of money on the side. Um, so that was exciting, but like I said before, it's incredibly time consuming, and I was still working a full time job and trying to manage all of it. And with 3 little kids, it wasn't the healthiest decision to spend that much time working, and I really wanted to spend time with my family.
Yeah. I can't imagine like trying to start a school from scratch has to be a pretty challenging undertaking in terms of getting the trust and buy-in from parents on that end.
Yeah, I underestimated what that would take.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But the part I want to kind of touch on a little bit is the fact that it was a lot of effort and time to run even a successful business. Is I think a lot of people underestimate that when they think about starting a side hustle, even if it's something less ambitious as starting a school and a community center. eh,
yeah,
As it gets more successful, it sucks up a lot more of your time. And if you're already working a full-time job, um, I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that even though it was successful, it wasn't enough to replace your day job. Or
right, right, yes. Because if it was, then I would have just quit. So it was
yeah,
successful in the fact that we were making money. We weren't losing
yep,
money on it.
yeah,
But that's it. Like, we weren't making anything significant. Um, but it had a trajectory that way where it could have. Um, I just had to make a decision, and the decision was I learned a lot, and let's sell it and make just a little bit of money, and that's what we did.
yeah. That's the thing that I talk about a lot on social media is side hustles are great if you want to just have a little extra income, but if you are trying to replace your 9 to 5, it can be a long, slow path, and that path usually involves a period of time where you're working 2
Right.
full-time jobs plus some. So it's
Yeah.
challenging, especially with a young family. It's not a
Yeah.
super viable path, which is why I recommend buying a business. So how did that
Mhm.
how did that enter your well, I guess you sold a business, so that's how it was on your radar of the idea of
Well,
buying and
no,
selling?
actually. I mean, yes, I sold the business, and so that idea was in my mind somewhere, but really with the medical billing company, I started working with the mergers and acquisitions team, and part of my role was to help the business, the emerging business coming on, to meet with those employees and figure out the best fit for them and help them through that transition process. And I started observing what happened there with a large organization and how they were able to go in and buy these smaller businesses, and it intrigued me. I got very interested in the process, and I also developed through that a strong passion for keeping employees on, and that I strongly believe that most employees can be taught or reassigned to help the company. Um, that mass layoffs are only something that helps a few individuals or shareholders or something like that, to make a little bit of money in the short term. But for long-term business health, keeping employees on and giving them the support they need is the most valuable approach. So, with that belief, I felt like I could go buy a business. I can help with that transition. I've already done it with several of these other businesses, and I can do it very well. I had the business experience. I have spent a lot of my life looking at P&Ls and analyzing numbers. So I felt like I knew enough to go down that path. But my first step was to hire a business coach, and s I hired somebody who had bought several businesses before, who helped talk me through that process because it's not an easy one.
Yeah. I, talk about that. What's not easy about it? What aspects were not easy?
Yeah. Well, first you have to figure out what you want and find a business that fits within what you want. Um, and then you have to be willing to put yourself out there and ask some questions. One of the most interesting pieces was I started figuring out some types of businesses that I felt like I could purchase and do well with. They were either in healthcare or in sports. Um, Healthcare was my experience, my past experience. Sports is my passion. So I was looking in those two areas, but I was just looking. And so my coach says to me, "Okay, now you need to just go start asking questions." Like, but I haven't done that before. And he says, "Great, but you have to start somewhere." Everybody who has ever bought a business had to ask somebody for the first time if they were willing to sell their business, or what their numbers look like. So you just need to go in and start asking questions. So he challenged me to get 10 no's, to just call and ask and get 10 no's, which I felt was great advice because I called and I got a couple of no's, mostly from brokers. When you go and start looking for businesses, the ones that you find online, most of them are managed by a business broker. That's what I found in my experience. The first couple asked me some questions, and I was so nervous and didn't know what to say that they, now looking back, I realized they disqualified me. They decided I wasn't really the type of person that was looking to buy a business. So then by the third call, um, I changed my mindset and just said, I'm just here to learn." So I just started asking questions and being truthful of exactly where I was at and what I knew and what I didn't know. And I, the business that I ended up buying, I think, was actually the third or fourth um, business that I contacted. I contacted some others and got some other no's and some other yeses, um, and moved down the process with a few different businesses. And then I had a friend who had analyzed businesses and their financials before, had him look at the financials of a couple of businesses, and ultimately decided on this sporting goods retail store that I purchased.
Interesting. So going back to when you hired the coach, were you still employed at that time or did you
Yeah.
get laid off?
Yep. I was employed. Luckily, I had just heard some rumblings in the company. I didn't really know that I was getting laid off. I just heard some rumblings and I thought, there's a chance that this could include me. And so I acted as if I was getting laid off. And then 3 months later I was, but I hired the coach within a few weeks after hearing that.
Nice. Yeah, and that's, I'm with you on being against mass layoffs most of the time as well in business. It just doesn't ever seem to pay off in the long run. Especially you watch some of these large corporate, publicly traded companies do mass layoffs, and then like 4 or 5 months later, you hear about them hiring all these people. And the way my brain works is that was a very costly mistake.
Yeah.
It's more expensive to hire new people. I'm sure you might be saving a couple bucks in salary over the long run, or the short run, but
Short run. Yeah.
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 But it's just crazy. But it happens, and as you saw, and it's happening quite frequently these days. So
Over.
you hired this coach. How did you find the coach? How did you qualify the coach?
It's funny. I remember asking some friends who knew some coaches, but ultimately what I ended up doing is I went online and I just searched business coaches and I read their bios and I interviewed um, 6 or 7 of them. And the one that I ended up hiring was one that had uh, clearly purchased several businesses and just felt a good connection with him. Uh, and I feel like that's important in business. We should use numbers. We should analyze the data, but we also have to use our gut. And that I've done that with other instances in my business, but certainly in this situation, it was he had the experience, and my gut told me this is a good fit.
Yeah, that's um, relationships are hugely important, and a comfort level with the people you're working with is important. And then and being smart about realizing you needed help. I mean, you had already been successful in running a business yourself, so in
Mhm.
theory, it could have been easy for you to say, I can do this. I know what I'm doing. But you recognized that having the right people in your corner, being around the right people, talking to the right people would be helpful. And it sounds like it was just in that challenge that he gave you in making those calls. So that's what I tell people. That comfort level too is hugely important. So I kind of tell people, whether you join my mastermind, or whether you join somebody else's mastermind, or you hire a coach or consultant, like everybody has their own little, idiosyncrasies and quirks and ways of doing business and talking about business. So finding the person or people that you identify with is hugely important. Um, I like that challenge too that he put you. Had you before you hired him, had you called on any businesses? Had you started browsing listings, or where were you at in the process?
I had started looking. I had found some businesses online, and I can't remember where I found them because I know he gave me some specific websites to look at. Um, but I had looked just a little bit, but I had not contacted a single one. I hadn't figured out in my mind how to do that yet, uh, which I realized after working with him that I had. He just had to challenge me to say, no, no, just use the knowledge that you have and be honest with whoever you're talking to, and just have the conversation. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, I like that. And that's kind of goes back to the earlier point of you mentioning that it wasn't easy. Like there's certain aspects of this process that are challenging, but a lot of times what I've found is that the most challenging part is your own mind. Getting out of your own way and having the confidence to go do something. Like, you had a successful corporate career, you ran your own businesses, you'd been involved in mergers and acquisitions, which is a lot more than most people have done. So you had a lot of the pieces already. You just needed to get out there and start putting in some reps.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes that's just what you need is somebody to push you uh, to just step out a little bit to take that next step. And I strongly encourage the same thing that you said. I just want to make that point that if you are buying a business, get a coach, find a mentor, join a mastermind group. Uh, it will provide the value that you need, and do it based on your feeling and your instinct and your research. There are plenty of coaches out there who probably haven't ever bought a business. um, and if your plan is to buy a business, it might be good to find somebody who has at least done that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not that they're not a good business coach. They might
Right.
be amazing at certain aspects, and that's where I mean, like, really dig in, make sure you're finding the right person with the right skill set for the thing that you're trying to do at the moment. You still had your job, but you're scared of being laid off. You're not, maybe not scared, but you're aware that a
Yeah, that's
layoff could
fair.
be coming soon.
Yeah.
That how did it take did it take a lot in your mind to justify going out and spending additional money on a coach at that point? Or were
Yes.
you just okay?
Yes. And that was one of the things I was looking at, is how much each one of them cost. There was another one that cost more than twice as much that I was interested in, but because of the price, I kind of discounted it. He probably would have been a great coach. But I connect well with this coach, and I was that was one of my first questions, is the price, and how can we make it work with my current situation, because I'm not ready to spend a bunch of money. But if you're going to buy a business, you got to be ready to spend money. And uh, honestly, that was one of the things that I had to overcome very quickly. I am, by all definitions, a tightwad. I am very conservative with how I spend money. And in buying a business, especially having a retail business, that requires constantly spending money before it comes in. And you have to buy the product so that it's on the shelves, so that it's ready to be sold. And that that is difficult for me to wrap my head around. I have obviously learned to to do that. But there's still plenty of times that I struggle with it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't like spending money when I don't have to, and I try to find ways to get around it. Uh, and I did not hire a coach or advisor when I was buying my business, but looking back on it, it definitely could have made things easier and sped the process up for me as well. So you start making these phone calls, and you find this business. You said it was one of the first few phone calls you made.
Yeah. Yeah, so uh, I should have taken some better notes in my journal. I do journal now regularly, but I didn't
It's
do so
okay.
well at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Um,
that's okay.
but just a
Nobody's
side
no.
note,
We're not
it's a good
gonna we're
skill
not
to
gonna go
have.
back and try to. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so from what I remember, I called them up. I was interested. They gave me some very generalized numbers. Um, I I only asked a handful of questions at the time. They provided me with a summary of the business, and then they called it a P&L. It was a very generalized P&L, once I signed their NDA agreements. Um, and so I kept that one, and I kinda held on to it while I was reaching out to others, and, uh, found really, I ended up narrowing it down to a sporting goods business and a healthcare marketing business, and was looking at both of them, and ended up doing the sporting goods retail business because it was different, because I've always loved sports and I wanted to be involved in sports, and felt like this was a good way to do it. And it was exciting to me. Now, the other interesting piece is I hadn't done retail. I hadn't even worked a retail job. I worked at a hamburger stand in high school. Um, but all of my other jobs have either been in finance or healthcare. And so it was a very interesting decision to convince myself and others that I was doing what I was supposed to do. And there are some things that I would have done different. And the one thing that I'll mention is my next business that I purchased. I'll say it that way. I will buy it much bigger. This was under $1 million in revenue, and there's just a little more stability in buying a bigger business. But at the same time, I'm grateful for my experience, and I continue to run the store, and it runs well.
Nice. So that first conversation, you get some basic numbers, then you sign the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement with the broker. Uh, when did you first meet the owners, the sellers, and was there any relationship building in that department?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question because what I learned later is there were many people involved that wanted to buy this business. But it was the relationship that I formed with the existing owner that ultimately made him choose me. Um, so it was, again, timeline I don't remember. I'm gonna guess roughly 2 weeks, but not that important. So after a couple weeks, I met with the owner by phone and asked some questions and learned a little bit more about the business and how it runs day to day, about how many employees and how the employees work with them. I learned that there was one key employee that he ultimately said he doesn't want to do a deal unless the new owner agrees to keep her on for some period of time. And I now appreciate that. He was looking out for his employee. She's still with me, so I want to be careful how I say this, but I've said this directly to her. Um, I was initially skeptical about how well she would work with me and with my plans to grow the business. But she proved very quickly that she was reliable, that she knew the business inside and out, and the reservations I was feeling was just because she didn't initially know what was going on. And I mean, I would be nervous about a new owner coming in or just a new person coming in who is going to supposedly tell me what to do. But I was able to develop a good relationship, good working relationship. So,
From that first conversation, looking at the financials, signing the NDA, getting some more detailed stuff, and then one of the negotiation points with the seller. So you got to know the seller, which again you mentioned was you think one of the reasons that he chose you to sell it to, which is an important point. Like I talk about that quite frequently. And it comes up from other guests as well. Is it's a relationship game. Buying a business is all about building a relationship. If you're going to be butting heads with the seller from early on, it's not going to work out. The deal's never going to go through. And so the better you get along, not that you need to be best friends and lifelong companions, but the the better relationship you have, the easier the deal's going to go. And so it sounds like that was the case for you as well, or at least initially, why he accepted your offer. I want to get into that employee a little bit more too. Is employees in general, I've found are always going to be skeptical or scared of change. Humans in general are scared of change, and none of us like it, as far as I'm aware. And you're nervous, and so it's right for an employee to be nervous. I think it was great that that seller protected his employees like that, or employee, and it was good for you as well. It sounds like, because you had to give her a chance. Whether probably would have, given your take on layoffs, you probably would have given her a chance anyway. But at least now it was in writing, and you were kind of held to it. But and yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that ultimately is the an important piece of the relationship that I listened to the existing owner, heard what he was saying about this employee and about other pieces of how he ran the business, and tried to consider, okay, if he has a successful business, then I better at least try what he's doing and see how it works before I discount it. And so if he has an employee that he feels is important to the business, I better try everything I can to build that relationship with the employee. And then just to further what you were asking about that relationship um, process, it required meeting with the owner a couple of times. I went into the store as a basically a secret shopper. He didn't know what I looked like at that point. It was just a phone call before, so I wasn't even sure if he would knew who I was. I just went in, looked around the store as a customer, said hi, and left. Uh, Later, I learned that he had identified me and was pretty sure that that I was the guy that he had talked to before, which is totally fine. I thought it was kind of fun to go in and explore the business, but had a very honest conversation about that and told him why I did that way, that I just wanted to see how the employees handled business, how they treated customers, what the store looked like without any notice of somebody coming in. And it helped me in deciding that it was the business that I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great strategy. I did the same thing with my wine and liquor store before I bought it. I did that before I even talked to the sellers themselves. So walked in, browsed around, bought something, and then I also sat in the parking lot across the street for a while, counting cars, looking at, watching the traffic. For me, that's what made me more interested in buying the business, between seeing that the products that they had in there were not what I thought I could sell. And I thought that, I saw the demographics in the town changing. I knew that I would be able to sell some different stuff in addition to what they were already doing. So that's a great tip for anybody out there, like Brian did. Go in and shop. And even if you have talked to the owner before, it's okay. As long, don't go in there and tell all the employees that you're thinking about buying the business. Keep your mouth shut and just act like a normal customer, if you can. It's a great strategy. And then just to kind of finish up with that employee too, like one of the potential things you can come across in a transaction like this is that Brian mentioned, whether or not the employee was going to be on board with his plans. That's the other thing. Even if the employee is comfortable and knows, okay, this person's not going to let me go, I'm good. As any regular listener to the show will have heard me say, if you're buying a small business, you better have plans to grow it, because that's what you're going to get your cash flow from. And you could run into situations where the employees are set in their ways and accustomed to doing things a certain way, and they don't want the additional burden or additional tasks that come with growing a business. So it's something to watch out for. It can be a danger to get into a long-term arrangement by contract without knowing that, but sometimes it's worth it taking the chance anyway. So you close. Let's talk about financing real quick. How did you structure the financing on the deal?
Yeah, so I did an SBA loan, uh,
Okay.
and so that that process takes a little bit of time. There was uh, questions to me about my financial background, and I had to provide documentation. The I feel like I worked with a pretty good lender who was trying to move the process along. It took about a month of back and forth, gathering paperwork, asking questions from their end to get everything that they needed and wanted, and then another month to close. So I'd say a month of research on my end, a month of their due diligence, and then another month to finally close. So about a 3-month process. And I'll talk a little bit about the financing, because I know other people that I've talked to who are interested in buying business, people that I've coached a little bit, have been interested to know how the financing worked and where I found the money and what your options are. So, and I've heard on your podcast, you'll talk about seller financing and some other options. But for the SBA loan, I had some money in the account I also utilized a a second mortgage, or sorry, a HELOC on my home, and used some of that money to put the down payment on the business, to be able to acquire the SBA loan. Um, so that's an option. I looked into using my 401k. I also had family members with some money that I considered uh, having them be an investor in. Ultimately, I was able to pull enough of my money from the HELOC to be able to make that down payment and get the loan that I needed.
Did you tell the bank up front that that you were going to be using a HELOC for your down payment?
No,
Okay. Did they realize that at some point?
I don't know. I didn't hide it.
Okay.
I gave
Yeah.
them all the information that they asked for, and I even provided the HELOC when they asked for financial information. So
Yeah. I'm curious. Did the SBA put a lien on your house? Do
yes.
they ask for collateral? Yeah. So I'm just curious if that played any impact on because in theory, their collateral went down because you took out more money against your house. So they have less to collect if something went bad.
No,
That's why I asked.
I already had the HELOC before the whole process started.
Got it.
Um, and so that didn't change necessarily.
Yep.
And the
Yeah.
money was already moved to my personal bank account,
Okay.
from the HELOC. So
Got it. Yeah. So I would be interested to know if somebody out there listening is an SBA lender and knows whether or not if Brian would have run into problems if he tried to open up that HELOC during the financing process, if that would have changed anything for the SBA. So
yeah, now I'm
just
going to
my
get
theory.
somebody who's saying like, "Oh, you did it wrong, but they didn't catch you." So
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah. No,
The thing
I
is,
think you're right though. If you had already had it open and the money out anyway, so that they knew what they were getting going into it, which is
yeah,
I wonder if it would have changed the equation if you were opening it up during the process, if they would have come back and said, "Oh, we thought we were going to have this much collateral, and now you lowered that, so we got to change things on you." Just
yeah,
curious.
yeah.
Uh,
I'm curious
do,
too. So if
yeah,
anybody wants to
yeah,
reach out to me, yeah, I'd love to
yeah,
learn,
yeah.
for future.
Um, Yeah. Did you so was that a 10% down and 90% SBA loan then?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I was 10% down.
And then did you factor in your cash flow analysis? Did you factor in the interest payments that you were going to be having to make on against your HELOC every month?
Um, Initially, no. So when I was doing my cash analysis, um, during the during due diligence, I did not factor in that additional payment, and so I absolutely was making less than what I thought, within the first few months, um, and had to figure out how to adjust and recover from that.
Yeah. It's a great strategy to tap into your equity that you have, and instead of pulling out money from a 401k necessarily, because that comes with a lot of complications and or penalties and or having to do what's called a ROBS program, or rollover as business something. Um, but your way was much more straightforward, but it just does come with a little extra expense, which you, as a buyer, you have to be aware of. Make sure you're
Yeah,
considering it for
and yeah,
your
much
cash
better to
flow.
be aware of it beforehand instead of
Yep.
afterwards. But
Yep. Yep.
um, we
But
we
I
learn those
think
lessons as we go in business
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. And that's as long as it doesn't put you under, you're good to keep going. Learn a lesson, incorporate it for the next time. And I think I appreciate you sharing that too. And I think a lot of listeners out there and a lot of people I come across just immediately dismiss the idea of buying a business because they say they don't have the money. And what Brian is showing here is he didn't necessarily have all the cash just sitting around in a swimming pool in his basement, but he was able to go find that cash somehow, some way. And in his case, through a HELOC, but he could have tapped into his retirement savings, or he could have gone to trusted family members or friends, either as investors or lenders, depending on how there's different ways to structure that as well. So money wasn't going to get in his way, which I think is a great mindset to have.
Yeah, and I appreciate you pointing that out because that's something that I've talked to others about as well, is that sometimes you don't think you have. I didn't think I had the money at the time to buy a business. I just said I wanted to, and it was actually my business coach who helped me to kind of recognize, well, wait, you do have some money. We talked through the different options, and there's different ways to it. And if you are ready and capable to run a business, then there's the seller financing option as well, where maybe you don't have to have hardly any.
Yep, exactly. So many ways to get around the fact that there's no money, or you don't have cash on
Well,
hand.
you don't have the cash sitting in your bank account, but
Yep.
there's money out there.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So since you closed, how have things been going? Did you go in and make major changes day one, or what was your process?
Yeah, no, everything worked great from the beginning. No problems at all. It was just, um,
Perfect. Good. We should have just opened with that. It could have been a 2-minute podcast.
yeah, yeah. It's the easiest thing in the world. Everybody should do it. Um, okay, so I, more naturally, I'm sarcastic like that, but
That's perfectly fine. So am
I
I.
know on a podcast, somebody doesn't want to listen to me sarcastic the whole time,
Yep.
so I'll
Yep.
I'll try to limit it to that. But it, yeah, the first 6 months especially were incredibly difficult. Didn't have I didn't have the reserve funds that I thought I had. I had to purchase a lot of inventory. I either misunderstood the available inventory or it may have changed a little bit, from the time that I initially looked at it to when I actually took over the business. Inventory with a retail store uh, is a tricky game to play. So you have to buy enough inventory that you have enough to sell. But if you buy too much, then all of a sudden your bank account's dry. And I have had to get additional funding from some loans and other things to be able to get the inventory in the store when I need it, and then pay it off after. I have learned, like I said, I'm very conservative with how I spend money, but I have learned that having some debt to be able to move the business forward uh, can be an okay thing. And I say it that way because I've seen plenty who just spend. I've worked at other businesses where maybe the owner or the CEO is just spending and maybe not recognizing how much they're spending. So you got to be careful with it, but it's a way to move the business forward. And so I've had to do that a couple of times, but ultimately I narrowed the focus of the store. So our store now sells primarily football gear, weightlifting gear, and fight sports. It's like Muay Thai, boxing, MMA. And we're actually one of the only stores in Arizona that specializes in that. And so we do get customers coming from all over, because we have uh, lots of different options for fight gear. We have several different options for football helmets and pads, and then we have a good selection of weightlifting equipment. And so we focus that as opposed to utilizing the other sports, selling the other sports equipment. And even though basketball and volleyball and hockey are three of my favorite sports, we don't really sell any of that equipment in our store, um, because we had to learn to focus on what was bringing in the most revenue. And sometimes that's a hard decision to make. I mean, for me personally, I wanted to sell those other uh, sports equipment, and it just didn't make sense. There's other stores that are doing that, but we specialized and have narrowed our focus, and we continue to narrow our focus in that way so that people know exactly what they're getting when they come into our store.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm guessing you're not like a massive warehouse type store. So you're
Right. We're a
limited on
single
space.
location, local. We tout ourselves as local family owned. We've got 3,500 square feet of space, and most of it is full of the equipment, the products that we sell, and we use the space as well as we can. But yeah, we don't have massive backstock or any of that.
Yeah. Uh, in terms of the inventory, when you were negotiating the purchase price, did it include all the inventory, or was inventory going to be calculated at closing separately? How did you work that?
Yeah. The closing price included the inventory, and we did, so I was given an initial estimate of the inventory, but part of the closing process required that me and the existing owner went into the store when it was closed and itemized every piece of inventory that was in there. The issue for me was I wasn't as familiar with the inventory, so I mostly had to trust his valuation of the inventory. Now, most of it, he used the numbers that the suppliers gave him, like the actual cost that he spent on it. So he wasn't fudging the numbers on that or anything. But the tricky piece was we did that inventory about 2 weeks before the final close, and obviously things sell in 2 weeks, and he wasn't restocking, which again totally makes sense. I don't blame him for that. He wasn't doing anything against our agreement. I just didn't recognize that as a future owner of the store, how important that was to have that inventory coming in.
Yeah, 2 weeks of sales with no restocking, and you're paying for that inventory you counted 2 weeks ago. That puts you behind the eight ball right from the get go. I had the fortune of we counted the inventory at my wine and liquor store the day before closing while the store was closed, so nothing moved in between the time we counted it and when we closed on the deal. So it was exactly what we counted. Now, a lot of people would say that I made a bad decision by paying the wholesale. I paid the wholesale value, not the retail value, but I
Yeah.
paid full value for everything in the store, whether it had been there for a day or whether it had been there for 2 years. And
Hmm.
that was partially because it wasn't in my case, the sellers didn't have a good computerized system. They had no computers. So there's really no way of going, like, it would have taken ages to pick apart and say, well, this one looks older, so I'm only going to give you 50% for that. And this one looks new, so I'll give you 100% of that. In some retail settings, they just discount the entire inventory by a certain percentage, saying there's probably some that's gone bad, and that can fluctuate in the type of industry. In sporting
Yeah.
goods, you wouldn't think much would go bad either, so it's probably pretty natural to pay full value. Um, but
Yeah, but
making sure it's
that
all
is a
there.
piece that I wish I would have looked at differently, because now being in the store, I can tell, like, there's some things that sell quickly, some things that don't, and sometimes the things that aren't selling quickly are because they aren't in style anymore, or they aren't exactly the equipment that the coaches expect their players to have. And so there are some things that should have been discounted, that I didn't think to discount, because, yeah, it was the same thing. It's based on the wholesale price, um, which is what it should be. But some of those should be discounted depending on how long they've been in the store.
Yeah, if they've been in the store for a long time, it's for a reason, and you don't want your capital tied up even longer on products that weren't selling for the previous guy either. So
Yeah.
it's, depending on the size of the transaction, though, like from my case, I just didn't feel like it was worth it. The inventory, I think, came out to about $110,000 on a total sale of around 300 for the business and the inventory. And it just wasn't worth it from my perspective to nickel and dime and like spend all the extra time and effort to really try to narrow that down. Sellers were a little bit dismayed closer to closing anyway, because they realized that they were paying the brokers a commission on that inventory too. So they were already taking a haircut on that wholesale value from their perspective. Which, so if I started coming back and saying, well, we need to lower this and we need to lower that, it could have blown up the whole deal in my case.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's different ways to go about it, and ultimately you have to kind of balance that decision on how much do you want to push against the existing owner versus sometimes I mean, there's going to be losses in business and on both sides. So you can, like you said, nickel and dime it. You can detail every little piece of it. Ultimately, you have to just know that you're making the decision that you want to make, that's good for you, and move forward.
Yeah. Any other major hiccups or hurdles that you faced in the early days?
Um, Not major, but it's just some things that are interesting that you don't think about. With a retail store, within the first, I think it was 6 months, had a broken window. Somebody threw a rock while the store was closed, hit the window, and came in one morning and it was shattered. Just a random expense, and you got to fix it. I mean, I have insurance on the business, on the building, and everything, but ultimately it made more sense to just pay cash to get it fixed. Um, I did some different things, some changed the lighting, moved the register, all of those things, have expenses tied to them. Some of them I was very aware of and had planned in in the process, but the little things like the internet going out or the window being broken. It's a retail store. We have some theft, but actually very little, in my opinion, based on kind of where we're at. We're in a very public, easily accessible space. And there's people in and out of the store all the time. Our theft is pretty minimal, but it's not fun when somebody steals a $200 pair of gloves.
No, it's not fun at all. uh, did you make those changes like lighting and rearranging and register all day one, or did you give it some time? How did that work?
Yeah, some time. And um, there's definitely advantages to both sides, to taking time and doing it piece by piece, as opposed to just getting it all done at once and footing the bill and then recovering afterwards. I chose to do it a little bit at a time, over the course of the first year to year and a half. I mean, well, I guess no, we're continuing to make changes. So uh, that's just part of business. And if you're constantly looking at the business and evaluating how you can do things better, then you're going to make some changes that cost some money. And you just plan for it and make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that approach. I think, there's some people that buy a business and go in and very early on and overhaul a lot at once, which can be even scarier to existing employees, can turn off some customers, can cause some other issues. I think there's definitely pros to doing things piece by piece, and from my perspective, that almost makes it like there's something exciting going on all the time. Like, oh wow, now this is moved. Oh, now there's new lighting. Oh, this is the stuff's in this place, or now you're carrying this and you're not carrying that. That's kind of gives people a reason to keep coming back.
Yeah. And
Um,
I'll make a comment on that real quick because uh, when I first saw the business, I immediately started thinking of the things that I would do to change to make it better, right? And you shouldn't buy a business unless you think you can make it better. But at the same time, if you're buying a business that is making money, which you shouldn't buy a business unless it's making some money and doing fairly well. Um, but if that's what you're doing, then it is really important to listen to the existing owner, figure out what they're doing, let things work the way that they work, and see what needs to be changed after you really understand how the business is functioning. It's easy to just look at a business and say, "Oh, you should do this differently and this differently." Um, but it's really important to go in and understand what really is successful, put some numbers to it, put some data to it before you make the significant changes. That's my opinion on it. Is it's much more effective to go in that way as opposed to just making a bunch of changes all at once.
yeah, I love that. That's such a great point. I'm sure there's probably a lot of other things that you could share with listeners, but I want to be respectful of your time as well. Anything else that jumps out at you that we did not cover that you want to share with people?
Well, I've listened to your podcast and other podcasts, and I'll just make the point that I've heard other business owners make, which is buying a business can be very fun. It's not for everybody. There are challenges that come with it. So if you are ready to accept those challenges and to jump into something new, then I would highly encourage it. I love the amount of learning that happens within me, within myself on a daily basis that was taking me months, if not years, to learn working in somebody else's business. Uh, you're kind of forced to learn some things very quickly. And I appreciate the learning experience, and then also having the opportunity to connect with other business owners and other like-minded individuals. So be involved in the masterminds, in the leadership groups, and one of the most important lessons I've learned is it's so much more important to give, to find ways to give back. We make sure that we give back to the community. We make sure that we give back to other organizations that are coming in, to the football leagues and the coaches, and find ways to help and support them without expecting anything in return. And sometimes we get something in return and sometimes we don't. It's not a big deal. It's just so important to find ways to use what you have to give back.
I love that point. I'm actually going to be giving a talk this fall around the importance of buying businesses and how it relates to supporting our communities, and why it is so important that other local entrepreneurs buy these small businesses instead of letting them close or get bought up by PE firms, because of that giving back nature. Like, the support to the local nonprofits, the churches, the clubs, the sports teams, the fire halls, all these kinds of things come from the locally owned communities. So thank you for pointing that out to the future buyers out there that are listening.
Yeah, and even if you're not owning a
yeah.
business, support your local
Yep.
businesses.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. And and I've said this before too, even if it's not through actually buying something, if you don't need it or you can't afford it, leaving them a review, sharing their social media content with your following. Just, there's lots of ways to support local businesses for free. So please do it. Where can people find you, Brian, if they want to get in touch or if they want to buy some sporting equipment?
Yeah. Love to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. I'm on there and happy to connect. And then for the store, sportsexchangeaz.com. So sports exchange without the first E. And AZ is in Arizona.com.
Perfect. We'll put those links in the show notes. And with that, we'll get out of here. Thank you all for listening. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Cheers. And thank you for being here, Brian. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Business Buying for Financial Independence. If you're serious about owning your time and building long-term wealth, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.